process we go through that I could not sit here and tell you in 2 minutes or 30 minutes. Because it takes the first 3 months of training where we look back at that 13 weeks of Paris Island, look back and say, oh, that's what this is for once we get to MCT. And by the way, we are not warriors, we are guardians. That whole mentality changed between the Vietnam era you served and the era I saw. When we was out in 29 Palms, the way we turned around and got the Iraqis were sitting there teaching them they're going across, and they're telling all of us what we're going to do, and then they turn around and they say, what about you personally? And that's when they looked at me and said, well, we didn't know who America was, and we didn't know who Saddam was. But then your troops hit my uncle's car with your Hummer and don't even say sorry. Now you're not welcome in my community. And that's when we started using the teddy bear and candy bar approach. I turned around and told those Iraqis, I said, you know what? Why don't you turn around and teach our troops that? And then the methodology went throughout the Marine Corps. And that's how we actually started making friends and ended the war.
Well, we'd like to address this Obama thing. Go a little bit off script. So President Obama came out this with 2015, and when I said what he came out with, he simply came out and simply said that we need to work together as a community. He came out with the fact that we need to work with the local government, community, and law enforcement work together. So I like the idea that, you know, we can now attack something. When we attack it, we are still forgetting until you're out here on the streets and spending time on the city streets and the county streets. I'm just challenging how we keep going to war and the warrior mentality and the guardian mentality. Of course we're guardians, but it goes back to that training. Okay, I can tell you about when I was trained, and the mindset was, you know, for me, the training I received, they said that we'd rather be carried by 12, carried by 6, than judged by 12. So what I'm telling you now is that that mentality has to change. It has to change where we're starting to work and do things together. But getting back to this training thing, I keep telling you about de-escalation training. And the reason I keep saying de-escalation training is because it's simple. Yet things are happening out in the city and in the county, and these things can be changed by the way we train our people. But we can't do it for these 8 hours or come up with this miracle training that no one's ever seen. If it was out there, I would hope that we've used it by now. And when we start speaking about the President Obama, we didn't adopt it. No one has used it. And if they have, they haven't used it locally. So I do appreciate the fact that we are now recognizing that there's another way. And now the question is, are we going to vote to ensure that we try something different? It's time for a change. Thank you.
There's a lot of issues facing law enforcement nationally, so if we could turn to the issue of school shootings. Buncombe County has had school resource officers for decades, and in light of recent school shootings across the country, do you believe that we need more SROs, or do we need to develop a new approach?
Again, I have spent time as a school resource officer. I have experience at that. And initially, when the school resource officers went to the school, they went there as being mentors. And what that's turned into is a pipeline to prison. And what I mean by that is what's happening in our schools now is that we are now, if the kids get into an altercation, the school is suspending them, and then law enforcement is charging them. So now we have officers in school charging our young people. So I do believe that we should have SROs in each school. I do believe that, you know, we need to work on their training also. But here's my catch for this. I think we need to have more school counselors in the schools. You know, some would tell you that they want to arm teachers now. And I'm telling you that I don't agree with that, because now we're now bringing another weapon in the schools with someone, in my opinion, is probably not being properly trained. So I would be against that. But getting back to these counselors, we need people who are, again, going back to these relationships where we can work with our young people prior to them, you know, getting to the point where they're, you know, doing these mass shootings or having problems. And here's one for us all to think about. Law enforcement are out here working the road, and they're going to people's house, and let's say there's a domestic in someone's home. We have a problem getting that information to the school. When that student comes to school tomorrow, he's probably sleepy, tired, been up all day or all night with this situation that he's been faced with at home. But I think law enforcement, we need to find out how do we get that to the counselors? How do we make a bond or where we both can share this information so we can help our young people? So I think yes is to answer to the question about should we have more. And I think we just need to do a better job of training them.
We've got a few programs I'm sitting on. Probably, I've actually been telling people within 3 to 6 months of development, a year in program, we're looking at probably 100 million bringing in the county. Because actually what we have to actually implement in the county, all the other departments, state, nationwide, they're going to want a piece of it. They're going to be paying us, plain and simple. As far as how, the who's wins, I'm going to stay off of what I'm good at. Because I will tell you this, if anybody knows who Trammell Crow or Jones Lang LaSalle is, I was their field coordinator for 13 years. Every Midas, Shell, Pennzoil, Quicker State, Singular Wireless, AT&T, Bank of America, every single one of those buildings out there, from hiring and firing the contractors, the paints on the material, to getting the job done, top to bottom, that was me. You also notice I shake and I get a little bit excited. I'm a Wounded Warrior Project alumni. I've got a blown disc and know the VA just don't mystically take care of us. It's an 11-year paperwork process. And I also got a concussion where I was held down and beat by 4 sheriffs. When I spoke up on the evidence room audit, they came to my house, knocked on the door, saying Mom was hurt. When I opened the door, they dragged me to the ground, beat the heck out of me. The whole time I was screaming, God, get these crazy people off me. I'm not resisting. I didn't even know why I'm at my house. Of course, hindsight we do. That was the court work that Van Duncan dodged. You want to talk about our SORs, though, and the school thing. These kids can't turn to the officers. And I've been in jail and prison because when I spoke up, cops do retaliate. And where I should have only did a little time in jail, they used new statutes to run me in even longer for what would have been a 4-month maximum. And you can look at my record, I got 1 DUI. They didn't have a valid BAC, and they charged me with a fuse and blow for asking for my right to an attorney. But throughout all that, they also used 2012 statutes where I got to go up to Odom because I kept speaking out against Ron Moore and powers that be. Those kids need trust and faith, and I know how to deliver it to them. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to turn to your experience. This is a question from the audience. Could you both address what your experience is in actually doing law enforcement and what management experience you do have? Mr. DeBruhl, would you lead us off on that?
Well, Monday morning, I'd be with Trammell Crow, Jones Lang LaSalle on their projects, 100 contractors nationwide, California, Texas, Maine, Minnesota, you name it. Turn around on the weekends, I'd go and I'd report as platoon sergeant, over 50 to 250 Marines. When we got deployed, once again, when I was in Quantico, I was actually the ammo tech out there and we was helping train the FBI, OCS, and 75% of our officers and our law enforcement out there, our military out there, are law enforcement, especially reserve side. I've ate, slept, bred with them, and APD was trying to hire me actually, because my training is pretty extensive, and the stuff I know how to do. It's stuff I can't tell you, but I'm good at it. All Marines are, that's why we're number 1. Hey. As far as actually wearing a badge, I was second in line to be hired at Asheville Fire Department when I got deployed. I can tell you time and time again, I woulda, shoulda, coulda, and they were wanting me to be there, but duty called in other places. It's also why I didn't meet my son until he was 13 years old, because I get deployed, and she decided to tell everybody else it was someone else's. I'm built for this job. Billy Wicks, the programs I have introduced also. Mayor of Memphis, Mayor Latrell wrote me also testifying to they're still using it this day, some of it, parts of it. A lot of it I've adapted. But I don't think we necessarily need a cop that's been playing along with all the corruption we've had down there. And I think it is a little bit more of a business perspective we need, even though I have fun doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, please.
Yes. First, I'm going to just tell you, it's 36 years of experience and training. That's what I have. And that's been out here on the, I'm going to say the military is 11 years, 25 years in the Asheville Police Department. This is real interesting. The reason I'm gonna tell you it's real interesting, I've been asked about, how about the administrative part of this? And then I've asked people this question, because everyone keeps saying it's a business. Well, here's your business piece. If either one of you or anyone here, unfortunately, will have to have some type of surgery, I'll question you, are you gonna call the surgeon or are you gonna call the plumber? Okay, I'm gonna call the surgeon. If I need a question about law enforcement, I want the person who knows the most about law enforcement. Well, that's me. And whenever we start talking about this training and all this special training, I'm still looking for it, all right? And I'm here to tell you that if it's out there and we can use it, we need it. When you speak about just corruption, let's talk about being transparent. Let's talk about how do we now move forward. We can throw rocks and stones all you like. We still be in the same place. It's time for us to move forward, as I said before. It's time for us to do this as a community of we. And the only way we're gonna do this is when we stop getting stuck in the weeds and playing games. The idea is how we're gonna do something. When are we gonna do it? And I'm simply telling you, November the 6th is when we start this thing. Thank you.
What if the surgery's on your plumbing?
Excuse me, Mr. DeBruhl. Could you all, this is a related question, could you please describe your leadership style and how you'll implement that style in the Sheriff's Department?
Well, I've been asked this before also, but when I was in the police department, I had 10 people that worked for me. And so my leadership style says that is not true. I work for 10 people. So my job is to ensure that the deputies have what they need to do their jobs. My job is to make sure to keep this community safe. So part of that is how do we do this in a way that everyone has input. And that's when I start telling you about the community of we. We have to have everyone at the table. None of us know it all. And I'm simply telling you I need your help. And help means that you're gonna be at the table when we start spending money, when we start making decisions, making strategies that concern you, the individual. For so long, we've done this in law enforcement. We've seen that there was a problem. We came up with strategies. We went and worked on the strategy and worked on the problem that we had. And when it didn't work, we wondered why. Because we never asked the people who was being affected by it. We've never done that. So my leadership style is getting everyone to the table. Partnerships, collaboration, and then being this thing we call transparency, but doing that when it's time to spend those dollars. Have you at the table. Thank you.
Mr. DeBruhl, please.
10 bosses. I count 400,000 bosses. If you're going to be sheriff of Buncombe County, rough figure. Because every single citizen, every single person is going to come knocking on our door with every little problem they have to accommodate them the best we can. As far as my leadership, the most important thing anybody ever taught me and the most important leadership I ever saw was a man doing this right here. The whole time I was in that ring, training under Johnny Husky and Billy Wicks, Johnny was watching. He was actually attentively involved with everything going on. But most time, he is sitting back in the shadows because he's watching our breathing. He's watching how fast we're moving. He's watching if we're getting it, the whole 9 yards. Well, you've got numerous different departments throughout law enforcement. You got your investigators, you got your patrolmen, from top to bottom. You even got the admin people. My job is to turn around and to be inside every department, watching, seeing where they need fixed. It's one thing in the Marine Corps they teach us right off the bat. You don't go in changing things. Take about 2 weeks and see what's working. I already know a lot of what's missing, a lot of what needs to be taking place. And there's a few things I'm gonna do right off the bat, like have them write the charge sheets on themselves. Little things to help start opening up eyes and start mentoring and educating them. But as far as me personally, I'm just gonna be myself. You're gonna still see me in my boots and jeans. I still might throw my ball cap on, my cowboy hat or something, And I'm gonna see where they need my help. Other than that, I'm gonna let my officers do their job. I'm gonna start getting them the training they need.
Thank you. So another question from the audience. What steps will you take to ensure members of our community don't go to jail for being poor, having a mental health issue, or missing a court date? Mr. DeBruhl, would you please go?
Well, there's one strong point for me. How do you know what someone else is going through until you've done it yourself? Y'all all seen made headlines where I just filed for custody of my son, you know? Yeah, I've seen both sides of the fence. The fact of the matter is, if there is somebody out there with mental issues, the number one thing we got to be sure of, and it actually works with working with our doctors, be sure they're not blindly diagnosing, because there is a lot of well-being for doctors to prescribe stuff. And there are cases out there like that. Aside from that, if they really got issues, there is already set up inside the jail medical crew, medical team. They're actually out of state. They're contracted out. And then it goes through progressive steps there. Some people in the jail you don't actually keep in the jail. Some actually need to go to mental health facilities. And then some people, when you see it, false diagnosis and stuff. You know, there's a lot of... Zig Ziglar's law of business is probably one of the first things you need to reflect on when it comes to anything like this. 25% of the people out there have time and money. 25% have neither. 25% have one or the other, and vice versa. So that's what you're going to run across when you're in jail. 25% of the people were guilty and they knew what they were doing. 25% of them were not guilty, victim of circumstance or something. Then you got 25% of the people who are guilty and didn't know it, and 25% of them who know, you know what I mean? We've about got to use that same and treat everybody as an individual. You know, there's good people in jail. Jesus was in prison also. Thank you.
As I stated earlier, when we start talking about mental health, we start talking about drug addiction, we must recognize that this is a sickness. And I told you earlier that we're not going to be able to rest our way out of that. So one of that would be, how do we do diversion? How do we address people where they are? And it goes back to this education piece. I also have said that, you know, we're not going to be able to rest our way out, but there's some people there that financially they can't get out. What I mean by financially, you have people that's incarcerated now. They're only there because they can't pay the fines, or they can't pay their child support, or whatever that looks like. And some would say that those are poor people. But I would tell you that I think we're going to have to look at some way of how do we do some type of job training, a job program from the jail. And so I know that's a little bit far left or far right for some folks. But if we're serious about doing something, we're going to have to do something with the economy, which is kind of not my thing. And when I say it's not my thing, I would love to start a job program from the jail, but I'm going to need your help to do that, right? Because I keep coming back to this community of we. You keep hearing it over and over and over. Because again, I don't have all the answers, but I am willing to sit down and listen. And that's just one of the things I thought about is how can we do a job training program from the jail? How can we help people that's incarcerated? How can we help with their mental illnesses? How can we help them with their sickness? Some of that is why they're there. We're going to need to do some type of evaluation of them why they're there. You know, let's try to help people. Again, we cannot arrest our way out. Thank you.
Another question from the audience. What measures, if any, would you take to remove the Sheriff's Department from collaborating with ICE in order to protect immigrant communities? Mr. Miller?
Okay. I've been saying this the whole time, and I've said it and I'll say it again. So let me be absolutely clear. Again, I will not sign the 287G. Okay? And that's the agreement with ICE. Statute says we don't have to do it, so let's get that part out. The other thing I want to put out is that we need to understand that, in my opinion, the problem I really have with this is we are now incarcerating people without legal representation. We're incarcerating people for unlimited amounts of time and no one knows how long that's going to be. I don't like it, so I'm not going to support that. I would also tell you that we will do our job and what we have to, but I'm not going to sign the 287G agreement. Thank you.
You know, you talk about the job implementation, or the job training in the Sheriff's Department. It's one spot you need me. This is part of what I already got figured out. Talk about ICE. Till you can actually say you've ever personally dealt with the coyotes, getting somebody away from that. It's a rough situation. The drug train that used to run all the way from South America up, had 30,000 people. We built a great place, and I get it, you know. One thing I do, and one advantage I do see about ICE, no, I don't agree with any of the rounding up crap at all, whatsoever. But what I do see is that you actually have federal officers with something they need to do. And the implication on that is supposed to be more to reduce the drugs and the trafficking and stuff like that. I would actually prefer to turn around and be the sheriff that approaches ISIS and shows them how we can actually work for the greater good together and not be doing the silly stuff we see them doing. Plain and simple. They got a badge, they got a paycheck. All right, you got a job to do, let me show you how to do it right. And no, I don't agree with anybody hitting up anybody. In the Marine Corps, we only got one color. We only have one ethnicity. We're all OD green. The vehicles we drive, the ammo cans we carry, the packs we carry, the clothes we wear, and we're all Marines. And I'll tell you right now, I've been the lightest shade of green in many situations. And those that fell back and helped me, they didn't ask any questions about that stuff either. Sex, creed, when you're in the right situation, you realize that it all fades away when there's a job to get done. And that's what my officers are going to be out doing.
And this is going to be our final question. There's a lot of great questions here, so I hope if I didn't get to your question, you'll talk with your candidates afterwards. But for equal balance in race, would you be up to contracting with more Hispanic police officers in law enforcement? Mr. DeBruhl.
I'm gonna be perfectly clear. I ain't hiring anybody for anything to do with skin or sex. I'm gonna take the best qualified person out there. And me personally, if you really want to deteriorate the racism and the segregation, then instead of having Hispanic officers in Hispanic communities and white officers in white communities and black officers in black communities, you have white officers in white communities, black officers in Latin communities. You have straight officers in gay communities and gay officers in straight communities. You have every single person out there. Flogging Molly said it best, when black and white all starts to fade and soon we all see gray. That's literally what it is. When you have to deal, or when you're not even have to, when you're in a situation to where your back is covered by whoever, the most important part is that you trust them. You know? They got the training, they know how to do it. That's what I'm going to do with our officers. You want to ask about one of my pride and joys? It is my, and I hate using this word, I hate distinguishing people by anything other than who they are. But my lesbian cousin is the one that followed me in the Marine Corps. That's one of my pride and joys. And you know what? For anybody that talks about the women issues, she can whoop the heck out of you and me both at the same time. She's that tough. You know how she got there? Because people like me training her. And when you have that person and they're standing in front of another and they realize the capability of those officers, they don't get the gruff. When they don't have the egos and they're just being themselves with you. And not some story someone else wrote.
But to answer the question, the answer to that is yes. They do need to be qualified and be properly trained. I'm the person that believes that diversity does have its place in law enforcement. I don't think we should curve or cut any corners, but I do think there's qualified people, not only Hispanic, females. I think there's a lot of qualified people, but we have to give them the opportunity. So to answer the question is yes. One of the things that I would love to do is see about how do we, we have a lot of briefings that law enforcement, we encounter now. The chief and I think it was the district attorney was on TV. I think we should have that a translator, someone translating that for our people now. Because again, this is about all people. not just one group or set of people. And the only way we can, do this thing we call law enforcement, again, back to the community of we, that includes the Hispanic, that includes everyone, but we have to give them opportunity. So short answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank both of the candidates who are here tonight for Sheriff's Office, and we'll turn to Soil and Water now.
Can I just ask for like 10 seconds? We need to change the battery.
Perfect. We will take just a moment of a break.